With more on this now, Mireya Villarreal joins us from the U.S.-Mexico border in El Paso, Texas. My heart breaks for that father. I can't imagine what he's going through. Mireya, a government lawyer has now admitted that they missed today's deadline to unify about 100 immigrant children with their families. Why is this process taking longer than expected? They had at least a little bit of warning.
Yeah, listen, I think that the government has made every effort right now to try and reunite these families. I mean, the DOJ came out yesterday saying that they have been working tirelessly. The problem is that the Department of Health and Human Services, their mission, their task is to take care of these children. So now that you're having them work with agencies like Immigration Customs Enforcement, Customs and Border Patrol, I mean, they're having to kind of move outside their box to try and reunite these children, which is really not a huge facet of what they've been doing previously. So that's part of it. I think the other part of it is that they want to reunite these children and make sure that the children are safe. They want to verify that these families are truly connected, and that takes time as well. So you verify these documents. You also are now checking DNA. So it's a long process that they are really having to dot their I's and cross their T's because the entire world is watching right now.
Mireya, as you know, the Justice Department and the ACLU are going back to court today to decide what protocol has to be followed for unifying families. What has the protocol been so far, and what are sort of these new guidelines that the ACLU would like to see implemented?
I think those questions are the exact questions the ACLU has been asking now since the separation of families started a few months ago. I mean, there really is no true understanding of what the protocols are in place. I mean, we just figured out, or found out a few days ago that there were over 100 children under the age of 5 that were separated from their families. So I think the concern that has been from immigration attorneys, from these nonprofit organizations, from the ACLU is we want to know your protocol. Tell us what you've been doing and what the process is, because this is a very confusing situation for federal agencies involved, and then on the flip side of it, these families.
So we've been talking about the younger kids, I think, these sort of tender age kids, but there are kids who are older that a judge gave sort of a longer deadline for the Trump administration to reunite them. They got a couple of weeks to do that. We're talking about reuniting 3,000 older children. What's the likelihood of the Trump administration meeting that deadline?
I mean, look, if you talk to the immigration attorneys that we've been talking to, the nonprofits that we've been talking to, they say that the likelihood of reuniting that nearly 3,000 children that have been separated is not going to happen. They are not hopeful that all of them will happen by the deadline of July 26th. When you talk specifically to these parents, though, they are beyond frustrated and losing hope at this point. I mean, listen, as a parent, you've got to continue to fight, but it is an excruciating pain to be separated from your children. A lot of people will say, well, then why did you come over here illegally? Why bring your children into these situations? We're not just talking about people that cross the border illegally. You're also looking at asylum seekers that legally asked for asylum in the United States. So I think right now the situation is very daunting for everyone involved, both the families that have been separated and the federal agencies and the agents that are kind of stuck in the middle right now, trying to do their jobs, but clearly affected by what's been happening.
Mireya, as Anne-Marie mentioned, you in your piece spoke to a father who's been waiting to be reunited with his daughter. Tell us more about some of the reactions from families who are waiting to be reunited. How are they dealing with this?
Listen, guys, as a journalist, you try and your job is to stay down the middle, right? You're listening and giving both sides of every story here. But it's hard to ignore the heartbreak from a lot of these families. Yesterday we were talking to several families, but also to the immigration attorneys that are working tirelessly to help them get reunited. And some of the stories that we heard were just frustrating and overwhelming even for me to hear. These women, especially mothers, that were recently released by Immigration Customs Enforcement and also Border Patrol, were going to a local shelter here in El Paso, the Annunciation House, that has been working very closely with these groups, these people that are being released. And as the women were getting to this shelter, they were under the impression that they were going to walk into this shelter and that their children were going to be right there. You know, these agencies, these federal agents, don't know when reunification will happen, and they're trying to figure that out themselves. And so they're also telling these mothers, these fathers, that their children are in this shelter, that they will be reunited very soon. And then the reality hits them as they walk in the door and there are no kids in this shelter, and you realize that you're not in detention anymore. So that gives you some joy, but you are still not reunited with your family, and it will take a very long time for that to happen. I mean, some of these families have been waiting well over a month. The father we spoke to, several weeks. There's no telling how long this could take.
And you don't know where your child is. We've talked about this before, that, you know, some children are many states away, and in
some cases have been deported. Michael Abinati,
right,
in an interview
sometimes
I did
other
with
countries.
Him, he represents a family who has a child who was, last I spoke to Abinati, here in New York City, and his mother had already been deported back to Guatemala.
It sounds like such a mess. But, you know, Mireya, we should talk about actually where you're standing right now, because it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, actually, this is a first for me. I mean, I've done several live shots. I've done a lot of reporting across the border, but, you know, we had a very interesting producer say, hey, listen, let's try and do this from the bridge. And the significance of this is, listen, we've been talking to obviously the families that have been separated, the nonprofits, but we've also been talking to some of these federal agencies. You know, while we were talking to Customs and Border Patrol just yesterday, they said that they have seen a huge surge over the last few months, more than 5,000 family units that have come to the border in just 2 months asking for asylum. I mean, they've had to station agents right here where I am standing to tell people, we don't have room right now. We're not turning you away. What we are saying is, we can't take your request right now, so please come back later so we can process this properly. So, you know, I think all the way around we are seeing the systems, you know, are backed up. We've also heard that ORR shelters, the Office of Refugee Resettlement, you know, that there aren't any beds right now for unaccompanied minors. So again, you see the stress on the system that is being caused by, you know, the last few months of this policy and of the separation of these children. So again, you know, very interesting place for me to be, but I think also very relevant on a day like today.
Yeah, you mentioned that agents standing right there, specifically right there, and not sort of behind you at the office, because you're standing right in the middle of the two countries.
We can see the sign behind you.
Yeah, you can see the sign right behind me. I mean, this is technically the border. If I were to step over here, I'm in Mexico. If I were to take a step back, I'm more in the United States. So, yeah, very, very interesting place to be this morning.
It's interesting because you see an awful lot of people streaming past her, behind her, towards the United States. Not so many people walking on the other side of the bridge in the other direction. Mireya Villarreal, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.